how does in-orbit servicing fit within the long-term strategic priorities of your organization or agency?
Yeah, I can dive in from a UK perspective. It's a pretty easy answer. I think ISAM in general is mentioned as a key element within the UK's space industrial plan. So it's available on the internet if you haven't been able to read it yet. But it outlines 5 key different capabilities that the UK want to be able to focus on, and ISAM is one of those key areas. So we see it as a real opportunity for the UK to kind of strive and hopefully lead in.
So I think from an ESA's perspective, in-orbit servicing gives us, at least we'd like to think of 2 ways. One is leading by example in terms of space safety. We want to have, as I was saying before, responsible use of space. So in-orbit servicing is an enabler for that, to make sure that we have a proper end-of-life management, that we do not create the debris problem so they can continue using space for many, many years, say centuries. On the other side, there's also a commercial aspect for in-orbit servicing. And here, this is where we're talking about life extension, which is a very commercial aspect to it for the operators of satellites, especially in geo regions, but also looking towards refurbishing.
Let's say important in order to have a resilient use of space and sustainable use of space, and recognizing also the fact that there are elements of dual use behind the in-orbit servicing activities. Look at that at a large extent. So it matches many, I would say, general objectives about exploitation and responsible exploitation of space. Let me say such that. And there is another element that is a factor, at least if we look the wider worldwide perspective. Other spacefaring nations, let me say such that, are already doing in-orbit servicing activities. US, China, to mention a couple, let me say.
There will be infrastructure in space that will grow. It's not just growing by satellites, but also by logistics, by habitats, by tags, and so on and so on. And if this happens, and this will happen, then it's a natural move to go into this mega topic ISAM and support it. And this is where we are also following the whole path. Key element, surely technologies. I mean, there are some new technologies to be developed, but we heard a lot about this. There will be ISAU, use the resources on a better way, be efficient on the commercial side, so be cost efficient, prolongate the use of satellites, and so on and so on.
From a GNV perspective, we take signals from government and demand that might exist and respond to it. So yeah, I'm very much aligned in that regard. Having established the baseline strategic vision, how about we dive in a bit more into the next follow-on question, which is, what unique role or advantage can Europe bring to the global IOS market?
As we were saying, it's that kind of first to market mover advantage, isn't it? I think if we can prove ourselves from an in-orbit demonstration point of view perspective, that allows us to then say we are the global leaders in ISAM. And I mean that on behalf of the whole of Europe, not just the UK. But I think one of the areas that's probably least mature is the regulatory angle of ISAM. What are the rules of getting rid of something that is in space that doesn't belong to you? So it's very easy for us to say, right, we can do our in-orbit demonstrations of things that we've put up there, and it's our responsibility to clean up after our own mess. Absolutely. But what happens when there are other spacefaring nations that are perhaps less responsible than we are, and we want to clean them up for the benefit of Earth? In general, what are the rules of engagement around that? I think is an area that we perhaps need to flesh out a little bit more.
We also we think it's very important at ISA to lead by example, and to say that we actually have the courage to step into something that we believe is responsible, to hold ourselves accountable, to be responsible, and to say, well, it's not just that we just want to be responsible. We are going to take the first step. We're taking the first step, and this is something we are bold in Europe. We underestimate ourselves, but we are bold, and we are taking the first step in saying, well, let's remove debris. Let's start with that first step. It will start enabling technologies to do the further services, but this is the first responsible step. And not only that, but also we're creating regulation, and stringent regulation sometimes, I have to admit. And we're doing that to hold not others accountable, but ourselves. And I think that's a bold move to underline the fact that we want to lead by example.
What Europe can bring in the sector is we have, let's say, an industrial tissue that is, let's say, all over the space activities, I would say. So, and let me say, technologies, what at least for the Italian perspective, we decided to make an let's say a national mission, since there was the awareness that technologies, building blocks were almost here and there in Italy. But we in order to get into this big step, we had to face a real mission and operational activities. Since let's say, you have to tailor technology and to face many problems that we are facing by designing the mission. And if you never do it, you let's say your technology will remain in a sort of dead valley of the TRL development. Let me say such that. So Europe can bring is all its added value in terms of, in general terms, national activities plus multilateral cooperation.
I think we have to adapt. And this is a higher risk affinity, because if we don't take risks, we will lose time. And time is really what counts at that stage. And I know that ESA, there's the regulations, and I'm also a fan of ESA. But if we really want to get and catch up what's going on in the world, in the global market, in the future, I think we have to find ways to overcome this strict, standard process, and accept that we can take more risk and that failure might be an option. Because that's the worst thing that happens in Europe. I mean, if you have a failure in the mission, that's it. So from my point of view, it is important to really look at it and see if there's some. I mean, the structure is built in the way that we want to avoid failures, which is very good, because we want to be successful. But if the rest of the world acts differently, then we have to see if we find an adaptation.
Thank you, Timo, because that just dovetails us very nicely into the policy and institutional support element, mainly directed to ISA, ASI, and UKSA, with the lead-on question to that, almost as if we had planned it. So that being, what is the current policy landscape at the agencies for supporting iOS missions and technologies?
We decided to make, let's say, several axes of intervention. First is to taking on our shoulders the risky part, and this is let's say by deciding to make the investment, national investment for making and developing an in-orbit servicing demo mission that will be all on the shoulder on the shoulder of the Italian Space Agency. And so this will help our industry in developing key technologies, and so in also identifying which are the gaps, possible gaps that are still required to be filled. Second axis is to listen to industry by its commercial perspective, and this is something in a multilateral framework we are doing within the ISA program Address Rise. That industry was asking us, I see a commercial dimension, so of the ISAM, ISAS, and iOS, and we decided to put there the major Italian investment together in cooperation with all the member states, for sure.
In a minute or so, what are your predictions for the European iOS landscape by 2030? If you don't choose to be a future prediction, then what will be your one key recommendation to ensure that Europe and the UK stays at the forefront of in-orbit servicing?
So it's very important for us to stay at the forefront and to keep daring and to keep trying indeed to do things, to achieve missions and to be there as one of the first, if not the first, if possible.
I think that there is also a necessity for a kind of harmonization, a common understanding, and hopefully also a common responsibility, because I mean there's only one Leo, so to say, and I mean if things do go on like they are going on at the moment, I would say if we're not careful, it will be sometimes the end of crewed space activities in LEO, because it's much too dangerous to fly an astronaut there.
We need to be really comfortable with failing fast, I think, to move into that proof of product rather than proof of concept phase. We need to be comfortable with things not being a success the first time, and it's okay. I think that's the main message I'd want to see.
Thank you very much for your participation on this panel. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and taken some learning from it.